We live in an age of distractions, where the noise of the world drowns out the whispers of our own hearts. We are surrounded by endless methods to numb ourselves, to shield ourselves from the rawness of emotion, from the discomfort of confronting our truths. But in this pursuit of avoidance, we lose something precious. We lose the power to live authentically, to engage with our lives fully, to experience the depth of our being. The emotions we suppress today will manifest in the shadows of tomorrow, haunting us when we least expect it. In silence they grow, fed by our unwillingness to confront them head-on. This, my friends, is the weight of numbing, the quiet struggle we fight within ourselves. A struggle that may go unnoticed by the world, but one that shapes our very essence. Today I ask you to consider, what if we stopped numbing ourselves? What if we faced our emotions with courage and clarity? Let us explore together the truth behind this struggle, and the power that comes when we choose to feel fully, to live truly, and to embrace the depth of our human experience. 2. Facing the storm within, why we avoid emotions. We stand at the crossroads of our existence, where one path leads us into the tempest of our emotions and the other into the cold, dispassionate refuge of avoidance. To face the storm within requires an acknowledgement of the fear that stirs deep within us. It requires the understanding that, in truth, we fear the very thing that makes us human, our emotions. We avoid them because they are unpredictable, often overwhelming, and at times they seem insurmountable. But in avoiding them, we deny ourselves the opportunity to grow, to evolve, and to become who we are meant to be. Why do we resist? Why do we turn our gaze away from the storm inside? The answer lies in the belief that we must maintain control over our lives, that we must stand unshaken in the face of chaos. But this belief, while rooted in our desire for stability, is a false idol. We cannot control everything, and emotions are no exception. They arise not from our will, but from the depths of our nature. They are messengers sent to guide us, to inform us of the truths we have yet to confront. We fear them because they make us feel vulnerable. We fear that if we open ourselves to our emotions, we will lose ourselves to the fury of grief, anger, or despair. This fear is not without reason. It is natural to want to protect oneself from the sharp edges of suffering. No one seeks pain willingly, and yet, to avoid it is to shrink away from life itself. For it is through pain that we are molded, through suffering that we become strong. The Stoic philosopher knows that it is not the storm that breaks us, but our refusal to sail through it. The tempest is a natural part of existence. It is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, something to be embraced. Consider the words of Epictetus, who taught us that we cannot control the events that befall us, but we can control our reactions to them. Emotions, too, are events that arise within us, and while we cannot prevent them from coming, we have the power to decide how we meet them. To face our emotions is not to surrender to them blindly, but to confront them with clarity and resolve. It is to recognize that our emotions, however strong or turbulent, are not masters over us. We are the masters over ourselves. The Stoic approach is not one of suppression, for suppression leads to the erosion of the soul. It is not one of avoidance, for avoidance creates the very suffering we seek to escape. Rather, the Stoic response is one of acceptance. We accept our emotions as part of our nature. We accept them not as weaknesses, but as tools of self-awareness. It is through embracing them that we gain the wisdom to transcend them. To avoid our emotions is to deny our very humanity. It is to believe that we are weak, fragile creatures, incapable of withstanding the trials of life. But nothing could be further from the truth. We are built to endure, to rise above, to face the storms and emerge stronger. The path of avoidance is the path of the coward, while the path of confrontation is the path of the brave. It is the path of the Stoic. In the face of your emotions, I urge you to remember this: they do not define you. You are not your grief, your anger, or your fear. These are temporary visitors, passing through your mind like clouds in the sky. You are the sky itself, vast and unchanging. Your emotions are part of the experience, but they do not hold dominion over you. You are the one who chooses how to respond, who chooses whether to rise above or be dragged under. Facing your emotions is an act of courage, not weakness. It is the courage to feel, to allow yourself to be vulnerable, to stand before the storm and weather it with dignity. It is the courage to accept that your emotions, no matter how intense, are not enemies to be defeated, but companions on your journey of self-discovery. They are the fire that refines you, the wind that propels you forward. When you choose to face your emotions, you choose freedom. For in confronting them, you strip them of their power. You take away their ability to control you. You turn your fear into strength, your sorrow into resilience, and your anger into determination. You allow yourself to grow, to learn, and to become a stronger, more grounded individual. The storm within is not something to fear. It is not something to escape. It is the very force that will carry you to your truest self. So stand firm, my friend, and face the storm. Let it rage, let it roar. For you, the Stoic, will remain unbroken, standing in the center of it all with unwavering resolve. You will not turn away, and in doing so you will find your peace. 3. The illusion of control, escaping the emotional battlefield. We are driven by the belief that control is the foundation of a stable life. We believe that by mastering the external world and suppressing our emotions, we can maintain balance and avoid the chaos that threatens to overwhelm us. This pursuit of control is seductive, for it promises security, peace, and the avoidance of suffering. But it is an illusion, a fragile construct built on the idea that we can tame everything around us, including the most unpredictable force of all, our emotions. The truth is this: control is an illusion. We cannot control the storms that rage within us, just as we cannot control the winds that sweep across the sea. We cannot dictate the course of our emotions, nor can we suppress them indefinitely without consequence. To believe otherwise is to live in a state of denial, to ignore the very nature of existence. Life is unpredictable, and emotions are no different. They rise and fall like the tides beyond our command. When we attempt to control our emotions, we enter into a battle we cannot win. We seek to suppress, to hide, to bury them beneath layers of distraction and denial. But this is not strength, this is weakness. For every emotion we suppress, we create an internal conflict that consumes our energy and clouds our judgment. We become trapped in an ongoing struggle to maintain control, and in doing so, we lose touch with the truth of who we are. It is important to understand that emotions are not the enemy. They are part of the human condition, and like all aspects of our nature, they serve a purpose. They inform us, they guide us, and they allow us to experience life in its best form. To avoid or suppress them is to reject a vital part of our existence. Emotions are not to be feared or controlled, they are to be understood and accepted. The Stoic philosopher does not seek to control their emotions, but rather to understand them. We cannot prevent emotions from arising, just as we cannot stop the waves from crashing against the shore. What we can do, however, is choose how to respond to them. This is where true strength lies, not in control, but in our ability to face our emotions with equanimity, to acknowledge their presence without allowing them to dictate our actions. When we realize that we cannot control our emotions, we begin to see the futility of fighting against them. Instead of resisting, we learn to surrender. We surrender to the understanding that emotions, like all things, are temporary. They rise, they fall, and in time they pass. By letting go of the need to control them, we open ourselves to the freedom of simply experiencing them without judgment or fear. Consider the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, who, in his Meditations, reminds us that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In this, he teaches us that the very things we seek to avoid or control, the obstacles, the emotions, the struggles, are the very things that shape us. They are not to be feared, but embraced as part of the journey. The storm is not something to be resisted, but something to be navigated. And in navigating it, we grow stronger, more resilient, and more at peace with ourselves. By letting go of the illusion of control, we free ourselves from the constant battle within. We stop fighting against our emotions and start understanding them. We stop seeing them as obstacles to be overcome and start seeing them as tools of growth. Emotions, when embraced, are not weaknesses, they are the very essence of our humanity. They are the raw material from which our character is forged. True freedom lies not in controlling our emotions, but in accepting them as they are. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, we release ourselves from the burden of constant striving. We stop resisting the flow of life, and in doing so we find peace. The storm no longer threatens to overwhelm us, for we have learned to ride its waves, to move with its rhythm rather than against it. Embrace the reality that you cannot control everything, and in doing so, you will find the strength to face your emotions with clarity and composure. The emotional battlefield is not one where victory is won through force, but through understanding. Surrender to the wisdom of the Stoic mindset, and you will find that what once seemed like a battle becomes an opportunity for growth, for peace, and for true mastery of self. 4. The consequences of suppression: a broken mind and soul. We live in a world where the act of suppressing our emotions is often praised. We are told to be strong, to endure without complaint, to hide our vulnerability, and continue on as if nothing affects us. There is a deep, pervasive belief that to express our emotions, to show any sign of weakness, is to be less than capable. We fear judgment, we fear being seen as fragile or incapable, and so we bury our feelings deep within us, hoping that by doing so we will maintain our composure and preserve our reputation. But in this act of suppression, we are slowly eroding the very foundation of our mental and emotional well-being. When we suppress our emotions, we deceive ourselves into thinking we are strong. We convince ourselves that we are in control, that by ignoring our feelings we are somehow mastering them. But in reality, we are only postponing the inevitable. Emotions that are not acknowledged do not disappear, they fester in the darkness, becoming stronger and more volatile as time passes. What we suppress today will resurface tomorrow, and with it will come a far greater burden than if we had dealt with it in the first place. The consequences of suppression are not just emotional, they are also physical and psychological. When we suppress our emotions, we store them within our bodies, creating tension and stress. Over time, this emotional repression manifests itself in physical ailments, headaches, stomach pains, muscle tension, fatigue. Our bodies are not separate from our minds, they are intimately connected, and the burden of suppressed emotions takes its toll on both. The mind, too, suffers under the weight of unexpressed feelings. We begin to feel disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from our true nature. The more we suppress, the more fragmented we become, until eventually we lose touch with who we truly are. Our thoughts become clouded, our decision-making impaired, and our sense of self erodes. We become prisoners of our own repression, trapped in a cycle of emotional denial that is both exhausting and soul-crushing. The Stoic path teaches us to face our emotions, not to suppress them. Epictetus, in his teachings, reminds us that we are not disturbed by the events that happen to us, but by our judgment of them. The same can be said of our emotions. It is not the emotions themselves that cause us harm, but the way we react to them. When we suppress our emotions, we are not accepting them for what they are, we are rejecting a part of ourselves. In doing so, we create an internal conflict that weakens our mental and emotional resilience. We become fractured, our minds no longer in harmony with our true nature. True strength, as the Stoics understood, lies not in suppressing our emotions, but in confronting them head-on. When we face our emotions, we allow ourselves to heal. We acknowledge their presence without judgment or shame. We embrace them as part of our humanity, knowing that in doing so we can learn from them and grow. To suppress is to deny, to confront is to accept, and in acceptance we find freedom. The consequences of suppression are far-reaching. It is not just a matter of emotional discomfort, It is a matter of our very well-being. When we suppress our emotions, we are not just denying ourselves the opportunity to heal, we are denying ourselves the opportunity to live fully. We rob ourselves of the richness of experience, the depth of connection, and the clarity of self-awareness that comes from embracing all aspects of our being. Consider the example of Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless hardships and adversities during his reign as emperor. Yet through it all he remained steadfast, not because he suppressed his emotions, but because he understood them. He faced his struggles with clarity, acknowledging his feelings without letting them control him. He practiced what the Stoics call Stoic joy, the ability to find peace and strength even in the face of adversity. He did not suppress his emotions, he transformed them into opportunities for growth. The choice is clear: we can continue to suppress our emotions, to live in denial of our true selves, or we can face them, embrace them, and use them as tools for self-mastery. To suppress is to break ourselves down, to create internal fractures that leave us weak and vulnerable. To face our emotions is to build ourselves up, to become whole, to live with authenticity and integrity. The cost of suppression is too high. It steals our peace, our strength, and our clarity. It breaks the mind and soul, leaving us disconnected from our true nature. But by choosing to confront our emotions, we choose healing. We choose strength. We choose freedom. Let go of the illusion that suppression equals strength and embrace the Stoic truth. True strength lies in facing the storm within, in acknowledging our emotions, and in using them to grow. 5. Emotions are not our enemies, the nature of true strength. In our pursuit of peace, we often fall prey to the idea that emotions are something to be avoided, something to be conquered. We are taught to suppress them, to hide them, to deny their existence in our lives. The dominant message in society is that emotions are weak, irrational, and unreliable. To show them is to admit defeat, to be vulnerable, to expose a part of ourselves that we should hide from the world. But this belief is a misconception. Emotions are not our enemies, nor are they a sign of weakness. They are, in fact, integral to our strength. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that true strength is not the ability to repress or control our emotions, but rather the capacity to engage with them in a wise and composed manner. Emotions, like the forces of nature, are a part of our existence. They are neither good nor bad in themselves. It is how we choose to respond to them that determines their effect on us. To see our emotions as enemies is to misunderstand their nature. They are not invaders, trying to tear down our inner peace, but messengers here to guide us through the terrain of life. Think of anger, for example. Anger is often viewed as something to be feared, something to be suppressed at all costs. But anger, like any other emotion, has a purpose. It arises to alert us to injustice or violation. It is a response to something that feels wrong, a call to action. Anger is not inherently destructive. It only becomes so when we allow it to control us, when we let it dictate our actions in ways that harm ourselves and others. When we acknowledge our anger and understand its source, we gain insight into our values, our boundaries, and our sense of justice. It is only through this understanding that we can transform anger from a destructive force into a catalyst for positive change. Fear, too, is not our enemy. Fear is often seen as a barrier to action, an obstacle that holds us back. But fear is simply a signal, an alert to potential danger or risk. It protects us from harm by making us aware of what lies ahead. It is through fear that we develop caution, discernment, and preparation. The key, however, is to recognize that fear should not paralyze us. We must acknowledge it, understand it, and then choose how to act despite it. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. The Stoic approach to emotions is not one of suppression or rejection, but of integration. We do not cast aside our emotions as unwanted intruders, we embrace them as teachers. Each emotion, whether it is joy, sorrow, anger, or fear, has something to teach us. Our strength lies in our ability to understand them, to respond to them with wisdom, and to allow them to guide us rather than control us. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations writes, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." The same can be said for our emotions. They shape our character and influence our behavior. But we must not allow them to dictate our lives. We must shape them with our reason, understanding, and virtue. The Stoic does not react to emotions with blind force or avoidance, but with clarity, equanimity, and intentionality. This is the nature of true strength, the ability to remain grounded and steady in the face of emotional turmoil, to understand and master our emotions, and to use them as a force for growth. To view emotions as enemies is to misunderstand the nature of our humanity. We are not beings devoid of feeling, nor are we merely rational creatures. We are a blend of reason and emotion, two forces that work together to guide us on our path. The Stoic does not deny the existence of emotions, they accept them as part of the human experience. But they do not allow emotions to overpower their reason, to control their actions, or to define their lives. True strength comes not from the denial of emotions, but from the ability to navigate them with wisdom. It comes from the recognition that emotions, when understood and harnessed, are powerful allies on our journey towards self-mastery. The Stoic approach is not one of avoiding the storm, but of standing firm in the center of it, calmly and steadily, knowing that we have the power to shape our responses and maintain our peace. So I urge you to reconsider your relationship with your emotions. Do not see them as enemies to be fought or suppressed. See them instead as allies on your journey to wisdom and self-mastery. Acknowledge them, learn from them, and use them as a force for good. The path to true strength is not through the rejection of our feelings, but through the understanding and mastery of them. In this way we become whole, not divided by fear and denial, but united in the strength of our own awareness and acceptance. 6. The power of awareness, understanding the root of your emotions. We are often carried away by the current of our emotions, swept along without fully understanding the forces that drive us. We react impulsively, caught up in the surge of feelings that arise within us without pausing to consider their true nature. But to live a life of wisdom and inner peace, we must cultivate the power of awareness, the ability to observe our emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. It is only through this awareness that we can begin to understand the root of our emotions and gain mastery over them. The first step in cultivating awareness is to recognize that emotions are not random or meaningless. They are signals arising from deep within our subconscious, reflecting our values, beliefs, and experiences. Every emotion we experience has a cause, a root that lies beneath the surface. When we are angry, for example, it is not simply because something has happened to upset us. It is because something we value has been threatened, something we believe in has been violated. Similarly, when we feel fear, it is not because the world is inherently dangerous, but because our sense of security or control is being challenged. The emotion itself is not the problem, it is the interpretation we give it, the meaning we attach to it. To understand our emotions, we must first become aware of the beliefs and values that underpin them. Why are you angry? What does this emotion reveal about your sense of justice or fairness? Why do you feel fear? What does this fear tell you about your need for safety or certainty? In answering these questions, we begin to peel back the layers of our emotional responses and gain insight into the deeper forces that shape them. Once we understand the root of our emotions, we are better equipped to respond to them with wisdom and clarity. Instead of reacting impulsively, driven by the raw energy of the emotion, we can choose how to respond in alignment with our values and our sense of purpose. This is the essence of Stoic self-mastery, the ability to observe our emotions, understand their cause, and choose a response that reflects our highest principles rather than being swept away by the tide of our feelings. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations urges us to ask ourselves, what is it that is making me angry or fearful or sad? By examining the cause of our emotions, we gain the insight needed to navigate them with equanimity. When we understand the root of our feelings, we stop seeing them as uncontrollable forces and instead begin to see them as messengers. They no longer hold power over us, we hold the power to choose how we respond to them. This process of awareness is not a one-time exercise, but an ongoing practice. Emotions are dynamic, and the beliefs and values that shape them are not static. We must continually examine our emotional responses, asking ourselves why we feel what we feel, and seeking to understand the deeper currents that lie beneath our surface reactions. This is the work of a lifetime, a process of constant self-reflection and growth. Through awareness, we also develop a sense of detachment from our emotions. We learn to see them as passing phenomena, not as defining aspects of who we are. We are not our anger, our fear, or our sadness. These emotions arise and they pass like clouds in the sky. By cultivating awareness, we create space between ourselves and our emotions, allowing us to observe them without becoming identified with them. We recognize that we are not at the mercy of our feelings, but that we have the power to choose how to engage with them. The power of awareness is not just a tool for managing difficult emotions, it is also a key to experiencing the full spectrum of life's joys. When we become aware of the deeper sources of our happiness, we can appreciate them with greater depth and clarity. We begin to see that joy is not a fleeting or external condition, but a result of living in alignment with our values and our true self. By understanding the roots of our emotions, we open ourselves to a richer, more meaningful experience of life. Consider the example of a storm. When we are caught in the middle of it, we may feel as if the storm is all-encompassing, that it is consuming everything in its path. But when we step back and observe the storm from a distance, we can see that it is merely a temporary occurrence, one that will pass in time. Our emotions, too, are like storms. In the midst of them, we may feel overwhelmed, but with awareness, we can gain the perspective needed to weather them with calm and resilience. This is the power of awareness, to see beyond the storm, to understand the forces at play, and to respond with clarity and composure. When we develop the ability to observe our emotions without judgment, we gain the ability to navigate them with wisdom. We no longer react mindlessly. Instead, we respond thoughtfully, grounded in the understanding of who we are and what we value. Through this process of awareness, we come to realize that our emotions are not enemies to be fought or suppressed, but valuable teachers to be understood and embraced. They are messengers pointing us toward the deeper truths of our existence. By understanding the root of our emotions, we free ourselves from the grip of mindless reactions, and we become the masters of our emotional lives. The path of Stoicism is not one of emotional denial, but of emotional understanding. By cultivating awareness, we gain the wisdom to navigate the complexities of our emotional landscape with clarity and composure. We understand that emotions are not obstacles to be overcome, but powerful forces that, when understood, can guide us toward greater self-mastery and deeper peace. The power to master our emotions lies within us, and it begins with the practice of awareness. 7. Acceptance. The gateway to emotional freedom. There is a great power in acceptance. It is the key that unlocks the door to emotional freedom, the path that leads us from the chaos of resistance to the serenity of peace. Yet, many of us spend our lives fighting against reality, rejecting what is, and wishing for what could be. We struggle against the ebb and flow of life, trying to force the world to bend to our will, and in doing so, we create unnecessary suffering. But true strength lies not in resisting what is beyond our control, but in accepting it fully, in embracing life as it unfolds before us, with all its imperfections and challenges. The Stoic philosopher understands the importance of acceptance. Epictetus, in his teachings, reminds us that it is not the events themselves that disturb us, but our judgment of them. We cannot control the external world, and we cannot control the emotions that arise within us. But we do have the power to choose how we respond. Acceptance is the first step in reclaiming that power, for when we accept things as they are, without resistance, we free ourselves from the inner turmoil that arises from our attachments to how we think things should be. Acceptance does not mean passivity or resignation. It does not mean that we should accept injustice, abuse, or suffering without taking action. Rather, it means acknowledging the reality of the present moment without denial or distortion. It means recognizing that, while we cannot control everything, we can control our response. We can choose to meet the world with grace, with understanding, and with a spirit of resilience. When we accept our emotions, we allow them to be. We stop fighting against them, trying to push them away or numb them. Instead, we acknowledge them, understand them, and let them run their course. In this acceptance, we find peace. The anger that once threatened to consume us loses its power when we accept it, when we no longer resist its presence. The sadness that once weighed heavy on our hearts begins to lift when we stop fighting against it. Through acceptance, we release the grip that our emotions have on us, and we open ourselves to healing and growth. In the same way, when we accept the circumstances of our lives, we free ourselves from the burden of frustration and disappointment. We accept that life is unpredictable, that pain and hardship are a natural part of the human experience. This acceptance does not mean that we condone suffering or that we give up on striving for a better future. It simply means that we stop wasting our energy fighting against what is beyond our control and instead focus on what we can change: the way we think, the way we act, and the way we respond to the world around us. Acceptance is not a passive resignation to fate, but an active choice to live with clarity and purpose, regardless of the challenges we face. It is a deep, internal recognition that we are not defined by our circumstances, nor by the emotions that arise within us. We are defined by our response, by the way we meet life's challenges with courage, wisdom, and grace. Consider the example of Marcus Aurelius, who, despite being emperor of Rome, faced countless hardships and challenges throughout his life. He lost loved ones, fought in wars, and faced betrayal and political intrigue. Yet through it all, he remained calm and steadfast, not because he was immune to pain or suffering, but because he had cultivated the practice of acceptance. He accepted that life was filled with trials and tribulations, and he met each one with a sense of purpose, knowing that he could not control the external events, but he could control his response to them. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is not a passive surrender, but a powerful recognition of the limits of our control. It is the understanding that we do not have the power to change everything, but we do have the power to change ourselves. We can choose how to respond to life's challenges, and in doing so, we choose peace. By accepting the things we cannot change, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of frustration and disappointment that arises from resistance. We stop fighting the current of life, and instead, we learn to flow with it. To accept is to be free. Free from the shackles of expectation, free from the weight of regret, free from the illusion of control. Acceptance allows us to experience life as it is, with all its imperfections, without being burdened by the need to make everything conform to our desires. It is through acceptance that we can find peace in the midst of turmoil, joy in the face of sorrow, and strength in the face of adversity. So I urge you to embrace the power of acceptance. Accept your emotions, accept your circumstances, and most importantly, accept yourself. Do not resist the flow of life, but move with it, knowing that each moment is an opportunity for growth, for understanding, and for self-mastery. By accepting the reality of the present moment, you open yourself to the wisdom and peace that comes from living in alignment with what is, rather than what should be. This is the path to true emotional freedom. 8. Detachment. Liberating yourself from unhealthy attachments. The weight of attachment often burdens our hearts and clouds our judgment. We cling to things, to people, to outcomes, believing that our happiness is bound up in them. We invest so much of ourselves in external circumstances, in the fleeting world around us, that we lose sight of the only thing we can truly control, our own inner state. This attachment, though seemingly harmless, often leads us into cycles of suffering and disappointment. The Stoic teaches us the power of detachment, the art of letting go of the things that bind us, and finding true freedom in the ability to release. To detach does not mean to abandon love, to withdraw from life, or to become indifferent to the world around us. It is not about becoming cold, distant, or apathetic. On the contrary, detachment is the ability to hold things lightly, to appreciate them without becoming enslaved by them. It is the recognition that nothing in this world is permanent, and that our true peace comes not from clinging to what is fleeting, but from the internal strength that comes from within. We are often attached to things because we believe they define us: our possessions, our relationships, our status, our achievements. We tie our self-worth to external validation, seeking approval and recognition from others. But in doing so, we become dependent on the outside world for our sense of identity, and this makes us vulnerable to disappointment, fear, and loss. When something we are attached to is taken away, we feel as though a part of ourselves has been lost, as if our very existence has been threatened. This attachment creates instability and insecurity because we are relying on something beyond our control for our sense of well-being. The Stoic practice of detachment is not an act of denial but of recognition. It is the understanding that while we can enjoy the things of this world, we do not need them to be whole. We are whole in ourselves. Our happiness does not lie in the accumulation of wealth, the approval of others, or the attainment of success. It lies in our ability to remain grounded in our own character, in our ability to act with virtue, and in our capacity to accept what comes without attachment to any particular outcome. Think of a tree standing in a field. It grows tall and strong, but it does not cling to the soil beneath it. It is rooted, but it does not depend on any particular branch or leaf for its sense of self. It remains steady whether the winds are calm or the storms rage. This is the power of detachment, to remain grounded in who we are, regardless of the external conditions. When we become detached, we gain freedom. We no longer rely on external circumstances for our sense of peace. We no longer fear the loss of what we have because we understand that nothing in this world is permanent. We come to realize that the only thing we truly possess is our own mind, our own thoughts, and our own ability to respond to life with wisdom. Everything else is temporary, subject to change, and ultimately beyond our control. The wisdom of the Stoics teaches us that our attachments, whether to material possessions, to the opinions of others, or to specific outcomes, are the source of much of our suffering. When we tie our happiness to anything external, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment because external circumstances are always changing. The true test of our character comes when we face loss, change, or adversity, and yet remain unmoved in our inner peace. This is the power of detachment, the ability to stand firm in the face of uncertainty, to remain at peace even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. Let us take a moment to reflect on the nature of our attachments. What are we holding on to that is causing us pain or fear? What beliefs, possessions, or relationships have we become so attached to that we have allowed them to define us? These attachments are not wrong in themselves, but when we become enslaved by them, when we allow them to dictate our happiness, they begin to rob us of our freedom. To detach is not to reject life, but to embrace it without being bound by it. It is to recognize that we are not our possessions, not our achievements, not the opinions of others. We are the masters of our own minds, and it is within this domain that true freedom lies. The teachings of Epictetus emphasize that we must learn to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Our possessions, our relationships, and the events of life are all beyond our control. The only thing we can control is our response. When we let go of our attachments, we stop relying on external circumstances to determine our inner peace. We begin to live a life that is rooted in virtue, in wisdom, and in the understanding that we are enough, regardless of what we have or what we lose. The path to detachment is not an easy one. It requires us to confront our deepest fears and desires, to face the truth about our dependence on external things for our sense of self-worth. But in doing so, we open ourselves to a deeper, more enduring form of peace. The more we detach from the things that bind us, the more we come to understand that true freedom lies not in the accumulation of wealth or status, but in the cultivation of inner strength, wisdom, and virtue. So I invite you to begin the practice of detachment. Examine the attachments in your life and ask yourself, what would happen if I release this? What would happen if I no longer relied on this thing, this person, or this outcome for my happiness? The answer, though difficult to grasp at first, is liberating. You would be free. Free to live in the present moment, free to act with wisdom, and free to embrace life without fear of loss. Detachment does not mean that you must withdraw from the world, nor does it mean that you must forsake love, ambition, or purpose. It simply means that you no longer rely on these things for your sense of self. You are enough as you are. When you learn to live without attachment, you gain the power to shape your own life, to respond to the world with grace and wisdom, and to find peace in the midst of a turbulent world. In detachment, there is freedom, and in freedom there is true strength. 9. Embracing adversity, the Stoic path to resilience. Adversity is not an obstacle to be avoided, nor a punishment to be feared. It is an inevitable part of life, a force that shapes our character and tests our resolve. The Stoic understands that hardship is not something to resist or lament, but an opportunity to grow stronger, to cultivate resilience, and to discover the depths of our own inner strength. In the face of adversity, we find the true measure of who we are, for it is in our response to difficulty that our character is forged. To live a life of virtue is to accept adversity as a natural and even necessary part of the human experience. The world will throw challenges our way. Loss, suffering, failure, and disappointment are part of the fabric of existence. But it is not these external events that define us, it is how we respond to them. The Stoic response to adversity is not one of despair or defeat, but one of acceptance, courage, and resilience. We often fall into the trap of believing that a good life is a life free from suffering, but this is an illusion. A life without hardship is a life without depth, without the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to become the best version of ourselves. Adversity is not something to run from, it is something to embrace. It is the forge in which we are shaped, the fire that burns away our weaknesses and reveals our true strength. Every challenge we face, no matter how painful, is an opportunity to rise above it, to become more resilient, and to deepen our understanding of what it means to live a virtuous life. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, faced tremendous challenges in his life: wars, political intrigue, the death of loved ones, and the constant pressure of ruling an empire. Yet, through it all, he remained steadfast, maintaining his sense of purpose and inner peace. He understood that adversity was not something to lament, but something to be met with strength and wisdom. In his meditations he writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the essence of the Stoic approach to adversity. What appears to be an obstacle is, in fact, the very thing that will propel us forward if we approach it with the right mindset. In embracing adversity, we also learn the vital lesson of perspective. When we face difficult circumstances, it is easy to become consumed by negative thoughts, to see the situation as insurmountable or unfair. But the Stoic reminds us that our perception of events is what determines our experience of them. The event itself is neutral, it is our judgment of it that makes it painful or stressful. By changing our perspective, we can transform our relationship with adversity. Instead of seeing it as an enemy, we begin to see it as a teacher, an opportunity for growth. We stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and instead ask, "What can I learn from this? How can I grow stronger from this experience? The Stoic teaches us that our power lies in our ability to control our response to adversity. We cannot control the external events of our lives, but we can control our thoughts, our attitudes, and our actions. This is the foundation of resilience, the understanding that while we may not be able to avoid hardship, we can always choose how to face it. Resilience is not about avoiding pain or difficulty, it is about developing the inner strength to face whatever comes with courage, wisdom, and equanimity. Consider the example of a tree that stands firm in the face of a storm. The wind may bend its branches, the rain may batter its leaves, but the tree remains rooted in the earth, unshaken by the forces that seek to uproot it. In the same way, we must learn to remain grounded in our values, in our principles, and in our sense of purpose, no matter what challenges we face. Adversity may bend us, it may challenge us, but it cannot break us unless we allow it to. Resilience is also about acceptance. It is about accepting that life is unpredictable, that suffering is a part of the human condition, and that we cannot control everything that happens to us. But we can control our response. We can choose to meet adversity with patience, with strength, and with a clear mind. In accepting adversity, we stop resisting it, and we stop allowing it to rob us of our peace. We stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance and begin to see ourselves as agents of change, capable of facing anything that comes our way with courage and determination. When we embrace adversity, we develop a deeper sense of gratitude for the good things in our lives. We begin to see that hardship is not the opposite of happiness, but a part of the same continuum. Without adversity, there would be no growth, no strength, and no true understanding of joy. It is through the contrast of suffering and peace, challenge and triumph, that we come to appreciate the fullness of life. Every obstacle we overcome makes us more grateful for the moments of peace and calm, and every difficulty we face deepens our understanding of what it means to be truly alive. The path of Stoicism is not an easy one, but it is a path that leads to true strength, resilience, and inner peace. By embracing adversity, we stop running from life's challenges and begin to face them head-on. We learn to see obstacles not as threats, but as opportunities for growth. We become stronger, wiser, and more capable of navigating the storms of life. And in doing so, we discover the profound truth that adversity is not something to fear or avoid, but something to embrace with open arms. So, when adversity comes your way, as it inevitably will, meet it with the resolve of a Stoic. Do not cower or shrink from it. Face it with courage, understanding that it is through adversity that you will find your true strength. The impediment is the way. What stands in your path is not an enemy, but a teacher. Embrace it, learn from it, and emerge from it stronger than you were before. This is the path to resilience, and it is the path to true inner freedom.